Yeah. You made a comment about the good enough parent
Yes.
during the seminar.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that? I thought it was so good what you said, because there are people that say, and you'll hear this, I'm sure, from children, well, you weren't perfect.
Yeah.
And now where does that come from?
Well, what that comes from, I think, the distortions of the alienating parent to turn normal parenting, maybe flaws, maybe that moment when you look back and you say, oh, that was an example of a bad parenting day for me.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
and we all have those. But the alienating parent is looking for every sign of weakness in the other parent to exploit, right? To exaggerate, to make into a reason why the child shouldn't have a relationship. I always say, please somebody show me a perfect parent, you know.
Right.
I mean, and it's not just normal parenting flaws, it's also personality quirks.
Right.
You know, you have a parent who spent years in the military and is kind of obsessive about keeping everything straight and orderly.
Yeah.
You know, this becomes somehow an abusive trait that the child can't manage.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned the military thing, because, you know, I was in the Army, and one of the things that they want everything a certain way. When you're in basic training, your hangers need to be hung, and they need to be 2-finger.
Yes.
It's got to be perfect like this. Your t-shirts have to be folded a certain way. Every button has to be going a certain way. I had an inspection, and one of my buttons was not buttoned correctly. And I lost my privileges for that Sunday.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because, you know, even right now, my wife and I will talk, because I'm like, okay, I want my hangers, I want the clothes facing this direction. And even with the dry cleaners, I went to the dry cleaners and I said, is it possible you can turn the shirts to have them go the other direction? And the guy says, were you in the military? So I started laughing, and he said, so I'm not the first person that's asked this? He said, no. But anyway, it was kind of funny that it's a little bit of a quirky thing that it gets ingrained into you. You know, if you don't have your shirts facing a certain way or whatever, and it really helps to bring order to a disordered person's life. I was not the most organized person, and it helped in that way.
Certainly not a reason, though, to reject your parent, right? He makes me keep my clothes, my hangers all the right way.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's okay. But, you know, in a normal situation, that's something the child would grow up talking about, telling stories to their kids about. Well, my dad made me.
Yeah.
It's not something in a normal situation. It's not something that is a reason to say I have absolutely no contact with my parent.
Yeah.
He's not my father. I disowned him 10 years ago because he was, you know, obsessive about clothes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talked about, the other thing is the parent-child reversal, in a sense, that parents are there to help the child form a conscience, help the child know the difference between right and wrong. And something happens with parental alienation when all of a sudden the child is the one who's judging the parent.
Yes.
Can you go into that a little bit more detail?
So part of a severe alienation reaction, you will see a child, I will anyway, will see a child present in my office as hugely entitled, you know, grandiose. I get to make my own decision, you know. I get to say when I see my parent.
Are you talking about, is this a teenager, or is this, how early do you start to see these things?
Well, I would say 9,
wow.
10. Yeah, I've seen it that early. Definitely.
Empowering kids, huh?
Yes. To be able to make decisions about their visitation schedule. You know, I'll hear the parents say, well, I just not going to make them go if they don't want to go. And of course, the common example that professionals use is, what are you going to say when they tell you they don't want to go to school? Or when they tell you they don't want to go to the dentist office because they don't like the drills, are you going to let them make decisions about school and medical care?
Yeah.
Then why would you let them make decisions about something as important as their relationship with their father or their relationship with their mother?
Yeah.
Well, because I know how he can be, or I know how she can be. So what you get is an investment. Again, the parent has an investment in believing that it's horrible for the child over there. So the child will begin to tell stories to explain why it is they don't want to go over there. And the stories get worse and worse because, and they've got a parent who's all too willing to buy into it.
Right.
Right? And so it just becomes, well, yeah, I completely understand why he doesn't want to go. I had to live with that for 10 years. I wouldn't want to be over there either. That's why I'm not married anymore.
Yeah.
And so there is a lack of regard for the specialness of the parent-child relationship, and in giving the child the authority to make that decision for themselves.
Yeah.
They elevate the child to a level of authority that surpasses the other parent.
Yeah.
They tell them, it's okay, you can tell that parent how it's going to be. You
Yeah.
can tell that parent when you're going to go. That parent doesn't have any say-so anymore.
Yeah. So you're almost saying at the same time then that they're almost forcing kids to become adult-like in a sense in their judgments, rushing childhood. Children should be able to be children and should be able to freely love both parents without being in the position of, I'm going to sit as judge of my father or my mother. So
yes.
I think that something happens when we rush childhood, when kids are made to act as adults too early and not.
Agreed. And one of the one of my mentors talks about taking away from the child their opportunity for an unconscious experience of childhood.
Mm-hmm.
The freedom to just be in your life, experiencing everything that your life has to offer, without the burden of the stress that comes from these messages that alienating parents will give.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that's, when I was talking a little bit about growing up and not having families that were divorced and everything, I remember a childhood where, you got to be a child. I came home from school, I could walk to school, I could walk back from school. We played baseball in our front yard, football, basketball. We had the biggest front yard in the neighborhood, so we always had things going on there. And that was just considered normal. But when you start to change the whole family dynamics, all of a sudden, childhood gets aborted. The necessity of having a healthy childhood gets overlooked. And that whole process, I think, in a child's development gets aborted somehow and screws them up later on in life. I don't know. I see too many people that appear like they don't even have a happy childhood. And I think it's a shame that takes place.